Good evening all and welcome. Before the video begins, I have a bit of an announcement. Merchandise. Some of you may know that I have this. I launched this collection a while ago, but because I'm launching a new one in a week, this one is going to be discontinued forever. So if you like the design, feel free to buy it now. Otherwise, you'll never get it again. I'm going to leave it on here for a week. So, next Wednesday, it will be gone. Thanks, guys. But for now, it's time to get uncomfortable as we question our reality and let the darkness take control. My mother did all her gynecology appointments with a doctor in downtown Austin. He was on the 5th floor of this hospital building and had a long-time nurse/receptionist called Allison. I remember attending her appointments when I was little and being in the waiting room, which was colourfully decorated with a forest scene. Allison was a super sweet woman who was half babysitter for us kids too. She would read us books, give us colouring books, and occasionally even listen to our dreadful knock-knock jokes. We'd all refer to her as Alice in Wonderland. Anyway, years down the road I got married and pregnant and started searching for an OB since I had moved back to Austin relatively recently before that. My mother suggested I go see if that doctor, who was super young, below 30s when I was born, was still in business. Well, I could not find his name in the hospital directory, so I figured I would just swing by the office and check. My mother happened to be in town as she had moved years ago and came with me. We both joked about being so familiar, but reverse situations now. As we reached the stairs, we ran into a problem. There was no 5th floor to the hospital office building. Odd. We both must have misremembered it. We knew it was on the top floor, so it must have been the 4th. Nope, not there. We thought perhaps we were in the wrong building, except we parked in the same parking garage from 20 years ago and walked the same route. That doctor does not exist. Never did, apparently. My mother and my brother and I are the only ones who remember him in Alice in Wonderland. We've asked around, including amongst the hospital staff. We even looked up our birth certificates, which are new copies, and just list attending physician. One of my childhood memories is fake, but somehow shared with my brother and mother. What the hell is going on? When I was around 8 or 9, I was coming back from school with my grandmother. We were walking, as my grandmother's house was 100 meters from the school. In the road to the school, there was a ruined red house. From the broken windows, you could see damaged stuff, dust, garbage, and the like. The house had a weird atmosphere, and my grandmother once told me that there was an old couple living there, but they passed away, many years before I was even born. So that day, we were walking as usual, to home from school, and I vividly remember how the door was open, and inside was old furniture but not damaged. I mean, not any more a ruined house from the inside. At the doorstep there was an old man, and by his side an old woman, and they greeted us like long-term friends. I thought that was strange, as the description of my grandmother matched the two people there. Later in the afternoon, I went to my grandmother and asked her about who those people at the house were, and my grandmother said that she didn't remember seeing anyone. So I got out, went to the house, and it was, as always, ruined, no one inside. The house itself is now demolished, and the weird stuff is that my grandma doesn't remember anything about that. My grandmother wasn't even mentally ill or anything, and was barely 60 years old, so I don't know what the hell happened. To understand this story, you're going to need a bit of information about me. I'm a 38-year-old man from Philadelphia. Growing up, I was a real loner. I had a few close acquaintances, but nothing more than that. When I was about 11, a family from Japan moved next door, and I became fast friends with their 2 daughters, Ayumi and Shoko. They were my closest friends on the planet. They even helped me get my first girlfriend. But things started to come to an abrupt end during our senior year of high school. They broke the news that they were moving back to Japan after they graduated. There was no stopping it either. After they left, and with no real direction, I enlisted in the military. Fast forward 13 years and I'm stationed in Korea. During one of the nights out, I'm enjoying the sights and sounds when I see a familiar face. And based on the unique way he was smoking his cigarette, I quickly knew it was their father. He was there on some business trip, and we caught up and exchanged emails, and he promised to tell the family I said hello and sent my regards. A few weeks later, he emailed me with a job offer in Japan and I jumped on it. I gave him my exit date from the military and he got me a work visa. Things were looking up, reunited with my best friends again. But this is where the curveball comes in. Shoko picked me up from the airport in Tomaya, and she looked at me dead in the eyes. "You remember my sister Ayumi, right?" she asked. Emphatically, I replied, "Yeah, you are both my only real friends." She turned pale and hung her head, then told me, "She doesn't exist anymore." Confused and thinking perhaps her English was slipping after all these years of not using it, I asked, fearing she'd passed on. She said the following, and I can still remember it verbatim to this day. "I don't know what happened, but one day I woke up and she was gone. No one seems to remember her either." She took me to the apartment her family had set up for me and made me promise not to say anything to her family. I reluctantly agreed based on how hard she was pleading. That night I called my family back in the US, and I asked if they remembered anything about her and her family. They all remembered the family and Shoko, but not Ayumi. I had them send my things to me knowing I had photos of the three of us in my family gatherings and parties from family events. A few weeks go by and my things came. All the photos were of me and Shoko, not a single one with Ayumi. Now I fully understand what Shoko meant when she said she didn't exist. It was like she was wiped completely from the face of the earth. So I did what any rational person would have done and started freaking out. Me and Shoko, being the only ones to remember her, started researching things related like this. Over time, we grew closer and eventually got married. We've been together 3 years now, still live in Japan, and every day we look into this further. If there is anyone out there who knows anything about this, or has any information that could be useful, you have no idea how greatly we would appreciate it. In college, I frequented a trail in the Appalachian Mountains near my college. Each time I would trek further and further, I never saw anyone on it, no matter how good the weather was. So, I just saw it as my own personal trail. For a while, I would walk to a large stream and turn back since it was wide and deep, and I didn't want to get my boots soaking wet. One day I was determined to cross the stream, so I moved several planks of sturdy dead tree to make a makeshift bridge. I crossed to the other side and everything felt subtly different. The air was different, the sky brighter, and surprisingly the trail on the other side was much better maintained than the part I'd come from. As I kept walking, I was noticing a lot of old soda cans lying around, the ones that are more perfectly cylindrical. I wasn't seeing any of the modern-looking soda can designs. I passed an old cabin. It was occupied, so I didn't bother investigating and went along my way. I kept walking until I got to a wider, deeper stream. I wouldn't be able to make a bridge to cross that though, so I turned around and headed back. I distinctly remember the sky turning overcast within a few minutes. I couldn't clearly see the sky since the trees blocked a lot of my view. I had just assumed a cloud had passed across the sun, but when I got a better look, the sky was completely different. It felt like I was walking along a completely different trail. This is the craziest part. I looked over to where the cabin had been to find nothing but the remains of the cabin. All that was left was the stone chimney. I had walked by the cabin an hour back, but there weren't any ashes or any smoke. There was a thick layer of fallen leaves and even some litter. Modern litter like beer bottles and cans with modern logos. I was dumbfounded and explored the cabin's remains for a good hour, until it began to drizzle. I walked back along the trail. The old soda cans were gone. The bridge I had built was gone. I couldn't see the logs further downstream. The rest of the trail was just as I had remembered it. I walked the last mile or so of the trail in darkness and rain, guided by my phone, which never could get reception up in the mountains. So that's my weird time traveling story. I made a point of wanting to get back to my college town so that I could revisit the trail and see what's on the other side of the second big stream. If anyone lives nearby, I'd love to hear what you can find in the rest of the park loop. I remember this like it was yesterday, because for me it was. It was July 22nd, 2011. I had just gotten married to my beautiful wife at the beginning of the month. I was 34 years old. Have you ever wrote your thoughts down knowing you're legally dead? Neither have I until now. Like I said, it was July 2011. I had only been married a few weeks. One day while my wife took a nap, I decided to take a walk. Right across from my house across the street is nothing but woods. According to Google Earth, the woods go on for a while. I may have been walking about half an hour to 45 minutes when I heard a noise. I'm not the kind of guy who believes in ghosts or Bigfoot, and I'm not worried about other people because I always have a knife or gun on me. I'm not scared easy. The noise I heard wasn't like a twig snapping, leaves crunching or rocks falling. It was more like a splash. So I followed the sound and it led me to a small clearing. I saw a creek, but the water wasn't clear like you normally see. Instead, it was a light greenish color. It had a glow and fog rose from it. It was like nothing I'd ever seen before. Only in horror or sci-fi movies, perhaps. As I was looking at the creek and all of its wonders, I heard the splash again. I followed the sound with my eyes and saw a downed tree. I saw part of a person's left hand. I immediately ran over and dropped to my knees to help this guy, and what I saw sticks with me to this day. As the guy raised his head in what I thought was to take a breath, he cut his eyes at me, halfway still in the water, and a smile formed on his face. Just as fast as I saw him, he was gone and disappeared into the air, gone, no trace of him at all. Then, in what I'm guessing was about an hour, I woke up. I know you're thinking it must have all been a dream, but just wait. I was still in the same spot I fell asleep in. I'd jump up, still feeling a bit dazed, and walk home. A million things were running through my mind, knowing my wife wasn't going to believe what just happened to me. I knew I was going to be in trouble. I finally made it home and tried to open the door, but my keys wouldn't work. Okay, that's weird, I thought. Suddenly, a guy opens the door and asks, "Can I help you?" Keep in mind, I'd never seen this guy before. I asked him who he was, and why he was in my house, where my wife was. Looking confused, he answered, "Son, we've lived in this house for 8 years. We moved in 2011. Even more confused, I asked, "What do you mean, 2011? My wife and I bought this house earlier this month." About this time, a woman walked up to him. I could only assume it was his wife, and whispered something into his ear. About the same time, a cop was pulling into the driveway. I'm guessing that's what she was telling him, and that she had called the police. They took my wallet, knife and gun and placed it on the hood of the squad car. The police questioned me, and the other guy, separately, comparing our stories in just as such confusion as we'd had. The other guy gave the police all the proper paperwork to prove his side and was released to go back into his home. All the attention was then turned on me. I told them I wasn't crazy, to just look at my wallet. I told them I had my ID and to look at the serial number on my gun. Neither would lie. They opened my wallet and laid everything out. There was nothing there but old newspaper clippings about nothing in particular. No ID. The serial number on the gun came back clean. It wasn't stolen, but there was also no name to the owner either. Frustrated, I told them to look. It had been a long day. "You can just drive me to my father-in-law's house, and he'll clear this up," I told them. The police officers looked at each other, then back at me and said, "Sure." And 15 minutes later, we were pulling into my father-in-law's driveway. A smile came across my face, and I breathed a sigh of relief, like a brick had just been taken off my chest. Everything was as I explained it to the officers, and soon everything was going to be okay. One of the officers knocked on my father-in-law's door to talk to him, and the other officer and I waited outside. A few minutes later, the officer and my father-in-law walked out to join us. My father-in-law looked at me with tears in his eyes. He said, "Sir, this officer just told me everything that's going on. I can't imagine what you're going through. I don't know how to tell you this, but I don't know you. I did have a daughter, but she died in a car accident 4 years ago. She'd never been married, nor had children. I don't know how you know these things about me, or what kind of sick game this is, but you need to leave." My heart sank. What in the world was going on? The officer apologized, thanked him for his time, and I asked where we were going, to which they replied, "The station," to try and figure this out. I begged them for one last try, to please call my dad. If anyone could make sense of this, it would be him. I gave him my dad's information, his name and number, the whole 9 yards. They pulled over, called him and told him everything. I could hear my dad yelling. He definitely wasn't happy, and he too thought this was nothing but a sick joke. He screamed, "I have no idea who this guy is or how he knows me. The only son I ever had, my ex miscarried over 30 years ago. I suffered with that loss daily, and this is just sick and twisted." There were a few choice words thrown in as well before he hung up on the officer. So I sit here now, as nothing more than John Doe. I'm not writing this thinking anyone will believe me, because no one else has. I'm writing in the hopes that the right person will hear this and know who I am and how it happened. My husband and I moved into a new house last year. COVID really did us dirty, and various less than ideal scenarios meant our savings took a huge hit. So we made the decision to move outside of the city. Cheaper rent, bigger space, a garden for the first time, all the good stuff. Since we moved in, there has been a really weird feeling, and I believe that, looking back, I have experienced a few odd things already. I have overlooked and tried to rationalize them away. The only thing I can't deny, though, happened earlier this week. I am still working from home while my husband is back in the office, so I am at home most of the day on my own. I have gotten used to this new routine over time, and honestly I'm pretty happy with working at home and the peace and quiet. It allows me to get other things done around the house during my breaks, and cutting out the commute has been a godsend, especially now that we're outside the city. Because of this new routine, I've gotten used to having a new sixth sense around timings of the day and when I can expect my husband to come home, usually around 7:30. The night this happened, I clocked off work early and decided to take a shower since it was hair wash day. Thick hair friends know how much prep this takes. My husband often comes home when I'm showering and usually announces himself as to not scare me. For a bit of context, our house is super old, English terraced, which means it's long and thin and tall. When we moved in, the landlord had just renovated the bathroom that's located right at the top of the stairs by adding a new freestanding shower ensuite. Basically, if you're standing in the shower with the door open, you can look right down the stairs and down the hallway with a clear view of the front door. When I'm home alone, I often shower with the door open to mitigate the scare I will inevitably get when my husband comes home and bumbles up the stairs. When my husband gets home, he always announces himself as he comes through the front door, usually something along the lines of, "It's just me." From the bathroom to the angle of the stairs means I can only see to the knees of whoever's standing directly at the front door. My husband knows this and always bends down so that he can wave his hands up the stairs. If he hears the shower, that is. So while I'm standing in the shower listening to the rattle of keys in the front door, I become consciously aware that it's much too early for him to be home yet, since I'd clocked off work early and it was only 4:30. While I'm freaking out and staring wide-eyed down the stairs, my husband comes through the door. I see his feet, with his familiar grey suit and dress shoes. He announces himself in his distinctive deep voice and bends down to wave. I see his hand angled up and a quick flash at the top of his blonde hair. Relief. He must be home early. Only he wasn't home early. After I relax, I look away to finish shampooing, and after about a minute later when I noticed that I'd never heard the front door close, and that I never heard the sound of his heavy feet on the wooden floor, or the loud thump of him dropping his work backpack on the floor before going into the kitchen. I peeked back down the stairs and everything was as I'd left it before showering. No bag, no work shoes, nothing. Everything was normal, except that my husband hadn't come home despite the fact I'd seen him do it. Naturally, I freaked. Even though I checked the door and it was locked internally, I still went through the whole house with a kitchen knife in case, yet nothing was out of place. I sat on the sofa in silence for about 2 hours before he finally arrived home and went through his routine, the very routine that I'd already seen him do that evening. I never told him about this and the other goings-on that I've remembered with the gift of hindsight. I know he wouldn't believe me. He's as skeptical as they come, and I don't want him to freak out that I'm suddenly seeing things. I was 14 in the year 2007. It was the fourth semester of my grade 9 year. I was so excited to finish the semester as I had a Christmas vacation to look forward to during the break. It was all I thought about. I didn't have much to look forward to in life at the time, as I'm a very shy kid who didn't have many friends, and my high school experience was only just beginning, so I didn't have many opportunities to engage with my peers in a meaningful way. So being the shy kid, I just fantasized about this vacation all day, every day. December finally comes, and it's time to go to Florida. My immediate family and I gathered all of our aunts, uncles, and cousins to take part in a huge drive from Windsor, Ontario to Fort Lauderdale, Florida, where about 25 to 30 of my relatives rented a massive, and I mean massive, beach home to stay in for our week-long vacation. The drive was approximately 2 days long, and we stopped to sleep in between. But I didn't mind. I wanted to get there. I didn't care how long it took. We arrived at the house and the fun ensued immediately. We played games, watched movies, swam in the pool, joked and laughed. It was a great time. It was the week going into 2008 New Year, so that was just another thing to celebrate. My family is loud and rambunctious, so this energy was welcomed for my shy self. Now, this is where the thing happened. I was sharing a room with my younger cousin James. When he and I were not playing video games in our room late at night together, we would tell stories, talk about life, and get excited for the adventures to come on our vacation. We headed to bed this night and fell asleep just fine. But in the middle of the night, I wake up groggy, tired, and sort of confused. I heard my cousin James rustling around in his bed and get up in a hurry. I didn't think much of it besides how frantically he opened the door and ran into the hall. The hall light was on, and everyone was awake. Weird. It wasn't New Year's or anything. It wasn't like he was running to see the ball drop. What was weird was that he was saying there was a huge noise coming from the entire house blaring on the smoke alarm. I didn't hear it at all, so this confused me. I get up and meet my sister Megan and my other cousin Catherine standing on the balcony worried and scared about the noise blaring through the whole house in the middle of the night. All of them were so scared, but I couldn't hear a sound. Not at all. I was standing next to my cousins and sisters asking what was going on, telling them I couldn't hear it. They looked shocked. I yelled down to my dad and uncles, who were shuffling in a panic trying to turn off the blaring sound, and I asked what's going on. "Don't you hear the sound?" "No," I reply. I couldn't understand the commotion. I almost floated back to bed, like a listless walk without any life, and curled back to sleep. Perhaps it was a dream. The next morning I asked everyone what happened, and they said, well, the smoke alarm tripped up. And I thought to myself, wait a minute, that wasn't a dream. Surely it had to be a dream because the frightening panic that was felt by everyone being disturbed by the sound, and I didn't hear a thing, yet I was there. Wasn't I? I asked my dad, and he said that I actually never was, that I never woke up from my sleep. He said I slept through the whole thing. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I was there. I asked questions about the sound, I said. To this day, my family still claims, my entire family, that I was not awake during the ordeal when they were fumbling around to turn off the alarm. It still confuses me to this day, and I spent the rest of the trip in a confused state trying to put the pieces together. But I just couldn't. Did I actually sleep through it? But it felt so real. I remember getting up and asking what all the ruckus was about, asking my dad about the sound, but no one said I was awake. Was I astral projecting? Was that why I couldn't hear the sound? Or was it a glitch? Perhaps I'll never know. When I was around 13 or 14, I had a dream that me and my mum were in Holland in a hotel to see my stepdad's daughter, and when they were checking into the hotel, I saw my mum, but in the dream I couldn't see my stepdad John. I mean, from the back it looked like him, but when he turned around there was someone else there when I woke up. A few weeks later, me, my mum and my stepdad John went to Holland to see his two daughters. So we checked into the hotel, bearing in mind I told no one about the dream because I didn't want people to think I was crazy. So we were checking into the hotel, and there I was standing. I saw everyone. It was exactly the same as my dream. I thought I saw John, my stepdad, but it wasn't him. And when the guy turned around, it was the same man from the dream. I got the biggest chills, and it was the most surreal feeling of my life. I think I was around 16-ish, and I was hanging out at a friend's house. It was normal for me to be over there hanging out, even if my friend and I weren't actually hanging out together. So I was wandering around the back of their house and I found a little door behind a set of hedges. Not like a tiny fairy door, but like a crawl space access square door. The funny thing was, it was not at ground level, but about 3 feet off the ground. I had been in this backyard before and been all over this house, and the door should not be there. If I went in, it would open up in the brick wall of the garage that had been converted into a small workshop room, and there was no door from the inside. But being a curious girl, I pried the door open and looked in. It was a dark and sealed up room. The floor, which looked like it was dirt, but there were a few pieces of furniture inside, against the far wall, which was the front of the house, a table/workbench which was set up with 2 chairs neatly tucked under it, and I also remembered a dresser, or an armory, turned around so the drawers faced the wall. There was also some cardboard boxes, and odds and ends scattered around, but everything had years of dust coating it. So with it being dark as coal, it was hard to tell what was what, but there was something written on the wall above the workbench. It was 2 words, and I'm certain the first word was jacket, and the second word was something that looked like free. I reached inside and felt for a light switch, but couldn't feel one, although I did see a bare bulb hanging down. I noticed my hands were covered in dust from the wall. I thought about it, and considered not crawling inside, as I lacked a flashlight, and wanted to tell someone so they could help me in. I left the door open and ran back inside to get my friend. He didn't believe me, but he still followed me outside. When we got to the backyard, I peeled back the hedge, and it was gone. The door just simply wasn't there anymore, and I knew exactly where it had been, but it refused to re-exist for me. My friend wandered back inside, and while I ran around the house a few more times looking everywhere for the damn portal, it never reappeared. But my hand still had the dust on it from reaching inside for the switch. But it was not the dirt that was outside. It was clearly different dust. I have no idea what I saw, but I'm glad I did not crawl inside now, as at the time it wasn't scary. But now, thinking back on it, it's terrifying to think about. Me and my friend were at a Chinese restaurant. We ordered a General Tso chicken and a shrimp lo mein. When we sat down, we took out our boxes and set them on the table about 2 feet apart. My friend opened the first box and sees a shrimp lo mein dish. It had all the things in there: noodles, shrimp, fried rice. He closes it and opens the other box. Inside is another shrimp lo mein dish: shrimp, noodles, fried rice. Oh, I think they must have mixed the order. I was just about to say this when my friend says out loud, "Look, they made a mistake and gave us 2. He opens the first box again. Inside is a General Tso chicken dinner order. White rice, egg roll. He froze and looked at me, and I looked back at him. We sat there in silence. It took us 5 minutes or so to collect ourselves. Neither of us have any idea how the hell that happened. I was sitting in my living room watching TV, and my mum walks by, and I say, "Hey," and she just walked into her room. A few minutes later, she walks through the front door with groceries, as she had just gotten home from the store. Someone please tell me what the hell just happened. There's no way my mum was there 1 second and arrived later. I just can't get my head around it. I used to work at a soup kitchen 1 day a week. This was about 10 years ago, and I still think about it from time to time. It's something I really loved doing, but had to stop because of health reasons. The place was run by a local church, and they had a group of regulars that worked there every day. Because of this, everyone had their own job or station that they worked every day. I was an outsider because I didn't go to church there, so I was basically just ended up doing wherever they put me for that specific day, and I did different things. So on this day, I was making and handing out tea. About halfway into the service, this middle-aged lady comes up in the middle and makes a beeline towards me. I've no idea who she is, but she looks very upset. Her eyes are wide, and she looks pale, and like she's about to cry. But before I open my mouth, she just says, "You look like my son." I was taken aback, but was like, "Oh, cool." She shook her head and said, "He died a month ago. You could literally be his twin. You look just like him." She was clearly very upset. I honestly felt I needed to apologize that she saw me today, but I didn't know how to go about doing it. She shook her head and started crying. "Almost had a heart attack when I saw you. I thought you were him. How old are you?" I told her I was 25. She shook her head again and said that he was 28, and that he died from a heart attack. I ended up apologizing and told her that I believed that everything happened for a reason, which I regretted saying because it was stupid, and I didn't know what else to say. She turned to walk away without taking any tea, but before she did, she looked back at me and said that God catches up to everyone eventually, and that he finally caught him. I think about that sometimes. I also tend to sleep very poorly, and often only sleep 2 or 3 hours at the most, so it means a lot of lights awake doing something or other than sleeping. A couple of years ago, I got into the habit of going out late to get something to eat and find a quiet place to sit and listen to stories on YouTube or the like. So that's what I was doing on this particular night. It was about 3 in the morning, and I was on my way back home, and ironically enough, I had been listening to Glitch in the Matrix stories. I live in a small town and rarely encounter another person when I'm out this late at night, and the roads are always empty. So I was on the highway, and there wasn't any other car near me. Suddenly, a bright yellow sports car comes roaring up behind me out of nowhere. Never did I see this car, and it was very conspicuous. Bright yellow with green stripes down the sides, and it was just suddenly there. The car pulls around, and as it's passing me, I see a custom license plate. It just says Glitch. I sat there with my mouth open and watched it drive into the distance. Never saw it since. We have 2 dogs and a cat. All 3 of them get fed early in the morning at the same time. Each one of them has their own dish with a specific plate that no one else uses. So one day Zoe's plate goes missing and we can't find it anywhere. It's not in the dishwasher, hidden behind or under anything, it's simply gone. Zoe is a 6-pound papillion, and this is a heavy glass plate, so she didn't just carry it off somewhere. We looked for this thing everywhere and couldn't find it, so we ended up just getting Zoe a new plate for her food. A few days later, that same plate goes missing also. No idea why, so we get a third. This one didn't go missing. However, a few months down the road, I was getting dishes out of the cabinet for dinner, and there was Zoe's first plate. Now you have to understand that I get dishes from there every day, and I put dishes there every day as well. It had not been there earlier that day, or before. I couldn't have missed it. Her plate also never gets put up there, even after it's been washed, it just stays on the floor. The second one never showed up. No idea where that went. My wife told me this story. When she was in her teens, about 14 or 15, She and a few female friends were spending the night at her friend's house. They all went to bed around the same time. When they woke up, they were over a mile away from her friend's house in an orange groove laying on the ground. You're talking 5 teen girls, no drugs, no alcohol. Nobody could move them a mile away without waking them. None were known sleepwalkers either. My wife has always been a very light sleeper. I can't get her out of bed in the morning without waking her. Luckily, one of them had their phone on them and had to call for a ride. But here's what I find extra bizarre. My wife and her friends, that I have asked this about, and that she is still friends with, completely accept it as something funny and brush it off. This is not something you brush off as a random and inconsequential thing. Maybe it's a lie, but they were all dead serious about it. It's almost to the point like they were brainwashed about the incident. This line of reasoning is not normal for a person, especially if it's not something that happens regularly. I would lose my mind trying to figure out how I ended up there. There's no logical explanation for how 5 girls can go to sleep with parents home and end up over a mile away in an orange grove. To this day, it is the one thing about my wife I can't understand and subconsciously bugs me because I want to know the truth more than anything, whereas she, the person it happened to, couldn't care less. I don't think that's right. I had an experience about 7 years ago. I was meeting up with a friend. He'd actually been an online friend for years that I met through gaming when I was a teen. He joined the military and ended up at a base near where I lived, so I picked him up at the airport and we decided to hang for the day. We hit up a GameWorks arcade, and after a few hours decided to head back to my car. I was parked in an underground parking garage, in the second underground floor. On the street level in the main lobby, there was an elevator to the lift, a bulletin board to the right, and stairs on the far left corner. A man and woman were reading something on the bulletin board. Being the lazy young men we were, we took the elevator, step in, punch G2, and start talking about the games we just played, and watch the numbers change from 1 to G1 to G2. Step out the elevator, look around perplexed as we find ourselves on the ground floor. The couple in front of us, who were reading the bulletin board, turned around and gave us creepy stalker looks. We looked at each other and mouthed, "Did that just happen?" We head for the stairs and reach G2. And I turned to him and asked, "You felt the elevator move, right?" "Yep, felt it move down and stop. The number changed to G2. "Yeah. Then what the hell just happened?" We've spoken to each other about this, and to this day we don't have an explanation. It's probably not the scariest thing you've ever heard, but to me, it always gives me chills. I'm completely certain I felt it move, and I vividly recall seeing the numbers change, so it had to have moved. I'd call myself insane if I'd have experienced this alone, but since I had a friend with me who also recalls the same details, I know it must have happened, and that something freaky was going on. For the past week, I've been staying at my mum's while I transfer my belongings from my old apartment to my new one. As there are no Tim Hortons near her, I settled for McDonald's for my morning coffee needs. Each morning I've gone through the drive-thru, ordered a medium, paid, and been on my way in under 2 minutes. Even with the usually quite crowded lines, this morning was different. When I arrived at my usual time, I found no one in the drive-thru. 2 brown garbage pails blocked both lanes, and there were almost no cars in the lot, except for 2 parked at the very back. Strange, but I've seen stranger. I parked and went in. The doors opened, but the restaurant was deserted, save for one old dude nursing a coffee and doing a puzzle in a paper. 2 young adults stood behind the counter as I approached, neither of them really moving or smiling or doing much of anything. "What can I get you?" one of them said, not even bothering with the usual pleasantries and smiles managers generally press service workers into saying. I ordered my coffee, put exact change on the counter, plus 20 cents, and the kid took it. Then I went to grab my coffee. The 2 kids working took ages to figure out the machine, And 5 minutes later, when I finally got my coffee, the order was wrong. It was black. I had requested cream and sweetener, but at that point I was getting a weird vibe and just wanted to leave. Curiosity, however, prompted me to ask, "Hey, so do you know why the drive-thru is closed?" He stared at me for a few seconds and then said, "Nope." There was still no one else in the restaurant in the few minutes I'd been there, and my desire to get the hell out of there was growing, so I hightailed it out of there. The creepiest thing that happened once I got back outside was the lot was full. Every single space had a car in it, but there was no one in the cars, and no one in the lot, and no one in the restaurant aside from the older guy with the newspaper. One car sat idling at the drive-thru window, with a guy who was staring straight ahead, and there was no one at the window at all. On the other side of the McDonald's is a bath fitter place and a funeral home, both of which were closed at 7:30 in the morning, and on the other side a bakery which was also closed. Residential houses surrounded the area. There is nowhere else so many people could have gone to in that hour for no reason and left their car at the parking lot. I got the absolute worst full-body shivers, got back into the car and took off really quick. I have no idea what that was about, what was going on, or if it was my coffee-deprived brain not making sense of everything. But it was genuinely an unsettling experience. I woke up one morning and went downstairs. My dad, stepmom and sister were all in the living room and stared at me in complete disbelief. They explained I'd already come down the stairs 5 to 10 minutes earlier, and they all said good morning as I walked past them without replying into the computer room. I would have assumed sleepwalking, except they would have had to see me walk out of the computer room and come back upstairs. I was playing around with lucid dreaming at the time and trying to have an out-of-body experience, so make of that what you will, even though I don't remember any of it. We live in the mountains, and there's a little store, a 5-minute drive from our house that closes at 9 p.m. My roomie and I wanted to go to get her beers. It was about 8:40. I agreed and we drove down to the store, and I joked with the guy working there about their evening rush, looked at my phone and saw it was 8:50, and said something like, "Well, at least we're not bugging you right at closing time or something." We get back to the car and started driving home. This store is off a main road. I mean a main road, but not really, just the main drive through our area. No street lights, heavily wooded 2 lanes, which we drove back on to turn left. We live in a small community off the right side of the road. About half a mile from where we turned onto the main road, there are 3 entrances into this community, which is just a collection of houses in a spider web-like sprawl of roads. All 3 are small roads on the right side of the road, and there are no other driveways or anything. The first entrance has quite a sharp drop on the main road and is easy to miss. It's the sketchiest one to take, and we often miss it because it's around a sharp turn and comes out of nowhere. The second entrance is the one we all usually take when coming from the direction we're driving in. It's across a flagpole that's lit up with a spotlight. It's pretty much the only light on the road. It's definitely not something you could miss. The entrance also slopes down into the park. The third entrance is like 3 miles past the first 2. Way down at the front of the park, it has a sign for the park, and when you drive in you get this entrance, the road slopes upwards, while the other 2 entrances slope quickly downwards. You get the mental image, I hope. So we turn left onto the main road. We're talking about whatever, we're not high or drunk or anything, and we were paying a reasonable amount of attention. Then we see a car approaching from the right, the headlights coming through the trees towards us, but it's coming from the wrong angle to be approaching the main road, from one of the roads that slopes downwards. This car is coming from above where it should be. We both say, "What the hell?" And then we pass the third bottom entrance into the park, which is where the car is coming from. And why is it coming from a higher angle than we expect? We should have taken about 1 minute from turning onto the main road to turning right into the first 2 entrances. We did not pass the first 2, nor the flagpole lit up by spotlights. We even passed the third entrance without realizing what it was, because it was about 3 miles further than where we thought we were. I looked at the clock right when we realized we had skipped about 3 miles of road and it was 9:15 p.m. We had literally left the store at 8:50 and driven about 2 minutes, lost 3 miles and 25 minutes. We have literally driven this exact same stretch of road hundreds of times. We have lived in the current houses for 3 years and this immediate area our whole lives. There was no way we just zoned out and drove 3 miles down a super windy road past spotted flagpole without noticing and spent 25 minutes doing it. We lost 25 minutes of time and are very freaked out. Hey guys, it's Mort here. Thank you so much for listening. I hope that everyone has had a fantastic day and enjoyed tonight's stories. Certainly thought-provoking to say the least. I really enjoy reading these kinds of stories, and if you did too, you can let me know in the usual way. As I said at the start, the merchandise showcased will be disappearing forever. I'm actually going to get another one of these. They're super comfortable before they leave for good. And if you'd like one, feel free to do so. I'm going to tell you in every video until Monday's video, because on Wednesday they will be gone. So there you go. Thanks, guys. I'd like to extend also a huge thank you to my members and my supporters on Patreon who mean the world to me. Thank you all. I've also got upcoming changes to both of these soon. So, you know, I'm just going to leave that there and we'll talk about it when they're done. Oh, a lot's been going on through my mind lately. Changes here, changes there, changes everywhere. And, you know, you'll get to see them soon enough. But for now, I'm just going to leave you questioning your reality as much as I am mine. So for now, stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.